Our panel is now ready for questions from the audience here in Diliman, as well as the 8 other campuses. Since we have very limited time, please keep your questions brief and direct. We will entertain the questions from Diliman first. Yes, please approach the microphone, state your name, college, and question. Please approach Dr. Mansad.
Those are my students clapping. I'm addressing this to R.C. Balisacan because I think he just kind of glossed over it. R.C., we're talking about the increase in poverty between 2003 and 2006. Now, in our history of measuring poverty, this has happened twice before, in 1991 and in 2000. And these increases in poverty, rather than decreases, were because the economy was collapsing. Now we have an increase in poverty in the face of economic growth. And that is totally against all your empirical evidence. Can you please explain to us what could possibly have happened?
Let me clarify that evidence. What the evidence shows is that if you are looking at 20, 30, 40 years of experiences of countries, you find that almost one-for-one relationship between long-term growth and poverty reduction. There are cases in the experiences of nations, and including the Philippines, where poverty can increase in the short term, meaning 1 year, 2 years, it's possible that poverty could increase, especially in years when inflation is very high, inflation rate is very high, when you have oil shocks, for example. This current experience from 2003 to 2006 is indeed a very puzzling one, because we have had respectable growth, respectable in the sense of our from the perspective of our historical standard, but not in the sense of the standards of our neighbors. But then you get this at the very best, it's a plateau, but it's in fact increased quite a bit, and that's the one that is very puzzling. Some of us at the School of Economics say that or take the view that perhaps the growth is quite exaggerated, or that exaggerated. It's the economic growth or there seems to be, let me rephrase that, there seems to be some problem in the statistical system. What exactly is the nature of that problem, we don't know. And I think this will require a thorough study of the entire statistical system, because I would not be surprised, as I said, if in 2 years, 3 years you see this spurt of poverty when growth is there. But in a span of 6 years, and where you have some modest growth, but poverty is not declining. That to me is a big puzzle. Giving us some work, Winnie.
All right, thank you very much. I understand we have a question from UP Iloilo. UP Iloilo, please come in.
Dr. Rodelio Suade, Associate Professor at the College of Arts and Sciences, is asking a question.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a question to any of the speakers. Someone says development projects and even policies have been biased in favor of Metro Manila and other urbanized areas, this has been a major reason for rural poverty. What do you think about this statement?
Tumpak. The observation is on the money. There has been a tremendous concentration of resources and attention in Metro Manila, and therefore to the neglect of the regions. The impression, I think, is real. To a great extent, this is the effect of, in the past, of the kind of industrial policy that we pursued for a long time. The industrial policy that we pursued in the 50s was import substitution, and import substitution policies involved a lot of lobbying, involved working government officials and government offices. And that is why these industries tended to flock into Metro Manila for the purpose. So it is, in a sense, partly a historical legacy that there's a tremendous concentration of resources and activity in this part of the country.
Okay, thank you. Standing by is UP Los Baños. Moderator is Professor Cuevas. Come in, please. UP Los Baños.
Economics major. Yeah, from UP Los Baños, NISMED and meet the BS Economics major with her question.
Good afternoon. My question is for Dr. Balisacan or Dr. Fabella. Sir, what is the impact of poverty on the Philippine middle class? Do we still have middle class, or is it only the rich? Thank you.
Okay, I think it's not very clear, so I will just read the question for the discussants. What is the impact of poverty on the Filipino middle class? It's a question from a student. What is the impact of poverty on the Filipino middle class?
I would say, poverty is a social problem. And if you have poor in your backyards, you can't be secure. In other words, you know, no one is safe. No one is happy ultimately if your neighbors, even if you're, you know, your neighbors are poor. In other words, the externalities created by poverty to society are quite enormous. And whether you are a middle class or upper class, the situation applies.
There is an observation called the missing middle. The poverty has ravaged the middle class in this country, and that is why I think the middle class is very thin and perhaps becoming even thinner. And so the missing middle observation is probably the effect of poverty.
Yes, yes, sir.
The burden of the anti-poverty programs will have to fall more on this, because as you know, if you have more people, then the pressure to institute more poverty alleviation programs becomes stronger. And if government responds to that, the only way it can pay for those anti-poverty programs will be to raise taxes. And guess who's been paying for the taxes in this country? It's really the middle income, the fixed income people whose withholding taxes, are sure as death. Thank you.
We have a question from, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Well, I guess just to add to that, to what Dr. is one of the stronghold against poverty. And it's a tax base that we have to protect so that we can have more money to, we can have more assistance to very poor or the poorest of the poor. That's something that some of you may react against, but the poor needs help. If you want to see this country grow, we need to pull out our poor from the features that was described earlier so that they become productive. They earn a higher wage. And right now, it is a reality that we have to contend with, and we have to do something about it.
Thank you. We have a question from UP Open University, Professor Victoria Bautista, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Please come in.
Of the governance strategies do you think should be prioritized to address or even hasten poverty reduction? Anyone want to answer the question? Thank you.
Which of the governance strategies do you think should be prioritized to address poverty alleviation?
In my book, if you ask me, I think most important aspect of governance that must be instituted is really zero corruption, have zero corruption. I mean, let's face it, every input of an education service or a healthcare service, if you take out what's the standard operating procedure, as they call it, if you take out 40% out of those funds, you are really diminishing the inputs that you can put in support of anti-poverty programs.
As NAPS, from our point of view, from our perspective, there are two determinants of poverty reduction, and that's economic growth and poverty alleviation, or the distribution of wealth towards poverty reduction. And therefore, if we're talking about poverty reduction, we should have a balanced perspective of both our economic positioning and the social interventions that we're doing. And therefore, it's not going to be one-sided only, but you have to have a balanced perspective of both our economic interventions and how we produce goods and services so that it accrues to the majority of the Filipinos, not because of vested interest, but for the interest of the whole country.